Have you ever stopped to wonder why some people are magnetically pulled toward you? Not just intrigued, but emotionally captivated, as if something in your very presence stirs a hidden longing in them. It may seem like a coincidence, like a charming byproduct of your personality or appearance. But what if love is not born in the conscious world at all? What if the people who fall in love with you are not responding to who you are on the outside, but to something far more invisible, something symbolic, even sacred, that lives within you? Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychoanalyst, believed that love rarely emerges from chance. Rather, it's guided by the deep architecture of the unconscious, where old memories, inner archetypes, and unmet needs quietly shape the path of desire. Comment: I'm ready to see myself clearly if you're serious about inner transformation. We often speak of love as a spark, sudden, magical, beyond explanation. But according to Jung, even the most spontaneous connections are formed by the soul long before the body recognizes them. They come from a realm deeper than the conscious mind, where ancient emotional patterns and silent wounds reside. Beneath every magnetic pull is an invisible map, a psychological structure that determines who draws us in and why. It's not fate, it's the psyche seeking wholeness, calling itself home through the face of another. This is where Jung's theory of projection begins to unfold. Each of us carries images buried deep within, fragments of unlived desires, lost emotions, and forgotten potentials. These are not just memories, they are living impressions of who we might become, if only we dared. But rather than surface in conscious awareness, they remain hidden. And then, one day we meet someone whose energy, presence, or emotional texture resembles that inner image. Suddenly, we feel enchanted. But in truth, it's not them we are seeing. It's a part of ourselves reflected in their being. Consider someone who has spent a lifetime being careful, emotionally guarded, and quietly afraid of their own vulnerability. When they encounter someone radiant, uninhibited, and emotionally free, the attraction may feel immediate and intense. But that pull is not just admiration, it's resonance. It's the soul whispering, "This is what I've buried. This is what I need to feel alive." The person becomes a mirror, not of who we are now, but of who we might become if we let go of fear and followed the call of the inner self. And the reverse is just as true. When someone falls in love with you, it may have little to do with your conscious identity. Instead, you may unknowingly represent something they've lost, denied, or never had the courage to nurture within themselves. You become not just attractive, you become necessary, a living symbol of their evolution. And for a time they may hold on to you tightly, not out of genuine love, but from a deep unconscious hunger. You fill the gap in their psyche. You awaken a dream they thought they had forgotten. This is the first reason Jung offers us. People fall in love with you because you symbolize something they lack. It isn't merely the charm of opposites, it's the soul recognizing what it has suppressed. A structured person may crave your spontaneity, a silent one may long for your fire. But if this longing remains unconscious, if they never realize that what they admire in you is what they must develop in themselves, then love becomes dependency. And dependency, when unmet, transforms into disillusionment. What began as a revelation slowly becomes resentment, not because you failed them, but because you unknowingly held up a mirror they were not ready to face. What makes projection so dangerously seductive is its ability to masquerade as love. When someone looks at you and sees a missing part of themselves, the emotion that rises is not neutral, it's charged, intense, spiritual even. They may say they've never met anyone like you, that you make them feel alive, whole, awakened. But underneath those words is a deeper truth. They are not falling in love with you, the person, but with the inner experience your presence awakens. It's not romantic affection, It's psychological recognition, and unless that recognition is brought into the light of awareness, it will eventually collapse under the weight of its own illusion. Many relationships begin with this type of projection. The thrill, the euphoria, the sense of destiny. It all feels so real because it is real, but not in the way we believe. It's real in the sense that our unconscious is really using this person as a screen upon which to project our deepest emotional templates. If left unchecked, we fall not into connection, but into a loop, a repetition of unfinished emotional business. Jung saw this not as failure but as opportunity. The projection must happen first, so that we may see ourselves clearly through the image we cast upon another. Jung deepened this idea with his theory of the Anima and Animus, inner archetypes of the opposite gender that live within each of us. For a man, the Anima represents the internal feminine, the emotional, intuitive, and nurturing aspects he may have buried or feared. For a woman, the Animus reflects the internal masculine, the strength, logic, and independence she may have suppressed. These figures are shaped not by choice, but by early life impressions, societal expectations, and collective unconscious symbols that span generations. They are powerful, invisible forces that shape not just who we're attracted to, but why. Over time, these inner figures become emotionally charged blueprints, and one day, we meet someone who unknowingly fits their mold. The attraction is instant, inexplicable, overwhelming. There's a haunting familiarity, as if you've known them before. But that sense of recognition isn't about the person, it's about the pattern. You're seeing a figure that has always lived inside you, now suddenly walking around in human form. And the love that erupts isn't about compatibility, it's about completion. You believe you've found your other half, when in reality, you've met your own projection. This brings us to the second reason someone might fall in love with you. You awaken an inner archetype they've carried for years. You don't have to do anything special. It may not even be about your appearance or behavior. It's your energy, your essence that matches an internal design they've held unconsciously. When this match occurs, the emotional reaction is enormous. They feel seen, understood, magnetized, but they are not seeing you. They are seeing a sacred symbol that has lived in their mind since childhood, now triggered by your presence. The danger in this lies in the mismatch between symbol and self. You may become the stage upon which they act out their myth, their longing, their inner fantasy. But no one can embody an archetype forever. When your humanity begins to emerge, your flaws, your complexities, your truth, the illusion begins to crack. What once felt divine becomes ordinary. The projection shatters, and with it, the intensity of the connection. Confusion follows. Disappointment rises, and often they retreat, not because of anything you did wrong, but because the symbol could no longer hold. The collapse of projection is not a failure of love. It is the beginning of something deeper. Most people mistake the breaking of illusion for the end of the relationship, when in truth, it is the first invitation to real intimacy. The unconscious, which once orchestrated the attraction through fantasy, now steps back and gives space for truth. But few are ready for this stage, when the divine glow fades and a person sees you as you are, human, flawed, real. They often feel betrayed, yet the betrayal is not by you, it is by their own unexamined ideals. This stage is what separates romantic illusion from genuine connection. If the person who once projected onto you can now meet you without the mask, a new kind of love becomes possible, one not based on longing, but on presence. But more often, when the projected image begins to fade, the person withdraws. The same intensity that pulled them toward you now fuels confusion and emotional retreat. You're no longer their savior, their muse, or their symbol. You're just you. And for those who were unconsciously using you to fill a void, that's often too much reality to bear. It's here that so many love stories turn into heartbreak. Not because the love was false, but because it was rooted in a fantasy that couldn't last. And this is not rare. In Jungian terms, almost every early-stage love is a dance of shadows and symbols. We fall not in love, but in projection. It is only when that projection is withdrawn, when the veil lifts, that we see the actual person behind the image. Some stay, choosing to love the real. Others flee, mourning the loss of what was never truly there to begin with. Still, Jung didn't see this as a tragedy. He saw it as sacred. Every heartbreak, every disillusionment, every failed relationship is a mirror. A moment of awakening. The intensity you felt wasn't wasted. It was necessary, because through it, the unconscious became conscious. You saw your longing. You witnessed your inner figures. You experienced the force of your own emotional myth playing out on the stage of life. And now, you are left with a choice: to blame the other person for not being who you hoped, or to ask yourself, what within me brought them here? When someone falls in love with you for symbolic reasons, they are unconsciously hoping you will complete a psychological story they began long ago. They want you to heal a wound, fill a silence, awaken a forgotten part of themselves. But when the real you diverges from the script, it can feel to them like something sacred has been lost. And you, through no fault of your own, may find yourself abandoned, not because you were wrong, but because you stopped being the mirror they needed. Yet if this realization is met with courage, it becomes the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole. When projection breaks, a person can finally begin the work of reclaiming what they've placed onto others. The qualities they sought in you, they begin to develop in themselves. The love they felt for the symbol becomes love for their own growth. And you, whether you stay in their life or not, remain the one who opened the door. We rarely see just the person in front of us. More often we see our history projected onto their skin, our memories wrapped around their words, our hopes shaped into their silhouette. Carl Jung taught that every person we encounter, especially the ones who stir us deeply, becomes a mirror reflecting what lies beneath our conscious awareness. When someone falls in love with you, they may believe it's your smile, your energy, or your presence that captivates them. But often it is the silent message their soul receives. You are the doorway to something forgotten inside them. This doesn't mean the love isn't real. It is very real, but not in the way we've been taught to understand. It is real as a psychological encounter, a soul event, a synchronistic meeting that carries a hidden lesson. Jung believed love was never just about romance. It was about transformation. You don't fall in love randomly. You fall in love when the soul is ready to evolve, when it needs to awaken a sleeping part of itself. It draws in a person who embodies that exact quality, and that person, often, unknowingly, becomes the guide. Sometimes you are that guide for someone else. Without realizing it, you walk into their life and become a symbol of strength, of freedom, of light, or of mystery. You become the thing they could not name but always longed for. The force of their feelings is not only about you, but about what you awaken in them. This is why some people love you as if they've known you forever, because in a way, they have. Not you as a person, but you as an image that has lived inside them, shaped by childhood, memory and imagination for a very long time. Yet this kind of love comes with risk. When someone sees you as a symbol, they may forget you are human. They may place their healing in your hands, their hopes in your actions, their wholeness in your presence. And when your complexity reveals itself, when you fall short of the ideal, they may feel abandoned or betrayed. But the betrayal is not yours. It is the rupture of a dream that was never grounded in reality. This is the nature of projection. It builds love on a symbol, and it crumbles when the symbol becomes a person again. In Jung's eyes, These painful encounters were not mistakes. They were necessary initiations. Every relationship, whether it lasts or fades, contains a teaching. Some come to awaken your courage. Some come to expose your fears. Some stir your dreams. Others reveal your wounds. But none are accidents. The people we fall in love with, and those who fall in love with us, are part of a secret curriculum. They arrive with emotional messages. Their presence delivers lessons the soul has waited years to receive. When you become this kind of mirror for someone, you are not just a companion, you are a catalyst. You show them, through your presence, a version of themselves they didn't know they were searching for. And that's a powerful role to play. It's also a sacred burden, because the love they feel may not always be for you. It may be for the version of themselves that finally came alive in your light. Though it may be painful to discover that love was built on projection, Jung reminds us that even illusions have purpose. When someone falls in love with you for what you represent, not who you truly are, it might seem like a distortion, but it is often the very distortion that leads them back to their truth. The soul uses symbols the way a child uses pictures, simple, immediate, emotionally rich, and sometimes you become that picture, that emotional symbol, that hidden part of their inner map, suddenly made visible in flesh and form. But this kind of love does not often stay balanced. If the other person clings to the symbol without doing the inner work, their affection turns into dependency. They don't want to grow. They want you to stay exactly as they imagined. They love the image, not the evolving soul, and that is where the relationship begins to falter. Because growth, true psychological growth, requires friction. It requires truth. And truth always asks us to let go of the fantasy in order to see the person before us. In many cases, the moment you begin to show your complexity, your own shadows, your own wounds, your need for reciprocity, the spell begins to break. You are no longer the healer, the ideal, the untouchable presence they projected. You are human, you are real, and strangely, that's when they often begin to retreat. Not because the love is gone, but because the fantasy no longer holds. And when love is rooted in fantasy, reality becomes unbearable. Yet here lies the sacred opportunity. If both people recognize the illusion and are willing to move beyond it, then what began as a projection can transform into true connection. But this requires courage. It requires each person to reclaim their shadow, their inner image, their unmet longing. Only then can love shift from need to mutual recognition, from desire to depth. Because only when the mirror is taken down can the soul truly see the other standing in front of them. Many people live in cycles of falling in love with the same type over and over again, not realizing they are chasing an unconscious image. They're not unlucky in love. They're simply stuck in a symbolic loop. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat. The soul keeps drawing the same lesson in different faces, until we learn it, until we integrate what the other person represents, until we realize we are not looking for someone to complete us. We are looking to become complete ourselves. When someone falls in love with you in this way, you may feel both honored and burdened. Honored because your presence has awakened something sacred. Burdened because you were never meant to carry someone else's healing. But even if the relationship ends, even if they walk away, the impact remains. You were the spark that lit a deeper fire. You reminded them of who they could become. And even if they don't say it, you became a chapter in their evolution. They will never forget. To truly understand love from a Jungian perspective, we must stop viewing it as something that simply happens between two people. Love is not just an emotion. It is a revelation, a symbolic moment where the psyche reaches out to itself through the form of another. When someone falls in love with you, it may be because their soul has found in you a path to its own awakening. You are not just a person. You are a message, a reminder of what they long to reclaim within. And the same is true in reverse. The people you fall in love with are often carrying pieces of you that you've forgotten, rejected, or buried. Maybe their confidence reminds you of the voice you silenced long ago. Maybe their warmth touches a part of your heart you closed off years ago. Maybe their chaos disrupts the careful control you've used to survive. You think you're falling in love with them, but what you're really falling into is a deeper encounter with yourself, and the relationship, whether joyful or devastating, becomes the arena in which your soul wrestles with its own becoming. Jung called this process individuation, the unfolding journey of becoming your fullest self. Every encounter, every love, every heartbreak plays a role in that journey. Some people walk beside you, others shake you awake. Some crack open your defenses, others force you to rebuild stronger ones. And some come into your life just long enough to change its direction forever. When someone falls in love with you, it may feel random, but if you look closely, you'll often find the fingerprints of fate, of a deeper pattern unfolding that neither of you consciously chose. It's important to remember that not every person who loves you is meant to stay. Some are meant to disrupt, some are meant to break the pattern. Some are simply here to reflect what you have refused to see. Their love may be real, but their role may be temporary, and that's not a failure. That's the soul doing its sacred work. Jung believed that these synchronistic meetings, where two people collide at exactly the right moment, are not coincidences. They are signs that change is trying to occur through the relationship itself. When you become that moment of change in someone's life, you might never know the full extent of your impact. They may leave, they may forget, they may never tell you what your presence meant. But deep within, something shifted, something awakened, and that awakening had your name written across it. You were the invitation to transformation, even if the person wasn't ready to accept it fully, even if the love couldn't survive the weight of becoming real. So why do people fall in love with you? Because you carry something powerful, something ancient. You remind them of who they are, or who they could be. You stir their inner archetypes, you mirror their soul's design, you reflect a part of their truth, and for a while that reflection feels like magic. But when the mirror clears and the fantasy dissolves, what remains is the real work to love each other, not as symbols, but as souls, whole, imperfect, and real. As the illusion of projection falls away, a different kind of love becomes possible. One not built on fantasy or need, but on awareness. You no longer need someone to mirror your forgotten parts. You begin to integrate them within. You stop seeking salvation through another's eyes, and instead, you look inward. Jung believed that this is where real love begins, not in the intoxication of idealization, but in the quiet recognition of another's soul, without losing sight of your own. You love, not because they complete you, but because they no longer have to. This is the gift of individuation. When you become conscious of your patterns, your archetypes, your shadows, and your inner figures, the entire nature of attraction shifts. You are no longer blindly pulled into relationships by unmet needs. You become aware of the forces at play within you, and from that awareness you can choose differently. You no longer fall for someone because they hold your missing piece. You begin to fall for those who respect your wholeness, and who are whole enough themselves to meet you without needing to complete you. Jung's vision of love was not sentimental. It was sacred. It was about the alchemical fire that burns away illusion and reveals the soul beneath. He believed that love, especially romantic love, is one of the most powerful tools the unconscious uses to push us toward transformation. Every heartbreak, every attraction, every rupture is not a detour. It's a message, a mirror, a lesson. And the greatest tragedy is not the loss of the other, but the refusal to learn what their presence came to teach. So, when someone falls in love with you, ask yourself, not in ego but in reflection, what in you is being awakened in them? And when you fall in love with another, ask what part of yourself has just surfaced through their presence. Not all love is meant to last, but all love, when seen through the lens of the psyche, is meant to illuminate. Even the pain carries light. Even the ending holds a door. What matters is not who stays or who leaves, but what part of your inner world has shifted because of the connection. You are not just someone to be loved. You are a guidepost, a living invitation, a reflection of dreams, desires, wounds, and potential. Some will love you for who you are. Others will love you for what they see in you. And some will confuse the two until they can no longer hold the contradiction. That too is love's work, not to make us feel secure, but to make us aware, and awareness is the doorway to freedom. In the end, the deepest love is the one that brings you back to yourself. Not as you were, but as you are becoming, whole, awake, and finally free to love, not from longing, but from presence. Not from need, but from truth. This is the kind of love that does not fade when the fantasy ends. It remains because it sees clearly. It remains because it knows. And in that knowing, love becomes not a dream, but a path.